英語聞き流しリスニング、英語テキストと MP3 音声ダウンロードはホームページからご利用いただけます。88thpp.com 88thpp.com
Chapter 5 The Kingdom of the Future. Tyltyl and Mytyl woke up next morning, feeling very gay. With childish carelessness, they had forgotten their disappointment. Tyltyl was very proud of the compliments which Light had paid him. She seemed as happy as though he had brought the blue bird with him. She said, with a smile, as she stroked the lad's dark curls, "I am quite satisfied. You are such a good, brave boy that you will soon find what you are looking for." Tyltyl did not understand the deep meaning of her words, but, for all that, he was very glad to hear them. And, besides, Light had promised him that today he would have nothing to fear in their new expedition. On the contrary, he would meet millions and millions of little children who would show him the most wonderful toys of which no one on earth had the least idea. She also told him that he and his little sister would travel alone with her this time and that all the others would take a rest while they were gone. That is why, at the moment when our chapter opens, they had all met in the underground vaults of the temple. Light thought it as well to lock up the elements and things. She knew that, if they were left to do as they pleased, they might escape and get into mischief. It was not so very cruel of her, because the vaults of her temple are even lighter and lovelier than the upper floors of human houses, but you cannot get out without her leave. She alone has the power of widening, with a stroke of her wand, a little cleft in an emerald wall at the end of the passage, through which you go down a few crystal steps till you come to a sort of cave, all green and transparent like a forest when the sunlight sweeps through its branches. Usually, this great hall was quite empty, but now it had sofas in it and a gold table laid with fruits and cakes and creams and delicious wines, which Light's servants had just finished setting out. Light's servants were very odd. They always made the children laugh, with their long white satin dresses and their little black caps with a flame at the top. They looked like lighted candles. Their mistress sent them away and then told the animals and things to be very good and asked them if they would like some books and games to play with. They answered, with a laugh, that nothing amused them more than eating and sleeping and that they were very glad to stay where they were. Light's servants were very odd. Tyltyl, of course, did not share this view. His heart spoke louder than his greed or his laziness, and his great dark eyes turned in entreaty on Tyltyl, who would have been only too pleased to take his faithful companion with him, if Light had not absolutely forbidden it. "I can't help it," said the boy, giving him a kiss. "It seems that dogs are not admitted where we are going." Suddenly, Tyltyl sprang up with delight. A great idea had struck him. He had not left his real, doggy life long enough to forget any part of it, especially his troubles. Which was the greatest of these? Was it not the chain? What melancholy hours Tyltyl had spent fastened to an iron ring. And what humiliation he endured when the woodcutter used to take him to the village and, with unspeakable silliness, keep him on the lead in front of everybody, thus depriving him of the pleasure of greeting his friends and sniffing the smells provided for his benefit at every street corner and in every gutter. "Well," he said to himself, "I shall have to submit to that humiliating torture once again, to go with my little god." Faithful to his traditions, he had, in spite of his fine clothes, kept his dog collar, but not his lead. What was to be done? He was once more in despair, when he saw Water lying on a sofa and playing, in an absent-minded sort of way, with her long strings of coral. He ran up to her as prettily as he could and, after paying her a heap of compliments, begged her to lend him her biggest necklace. She was in a good temper and not only did what he asked, but was kind enough to fasten the end of the coral string to his collar. Tyltyl gaily went up to his master, handed him this necklace chain and, kneeling at his feet, said, "Take me with you like this, my little god. Men never say a word to a poor dog when he is on his chain. Alas, even like this, you cannot come." Said Light, who was much touched by this act of self-sacrifice, and, to cheer him up, she told him that fate would soon provide a trial for the children in which his assistance would be of great use. As she spoke these words, she touched the emerald wall, which opened to let her pass through with the children. Her chariot was waiting outside the entrance to the temple. It was a lovely shell of jade, inlaid with gold. They all three took their seats, and the two great white birds harnessed to it at once flew off through the clouds. The chariot traveled very fast, and they were not long on the road, much to the regret of the children, who were enjoying themselves and laughing like anything, but other and even more beautiful surprises awaited them. The clouds vanished around them, and, suddenly, they found themselves in a dazzling azure palace. Here, all was blue, the light, the flagstones, the columns, the vaults, everything, down to the smallest objects, was of an intense and fairy-like blue. There was no seeing the end of the palace. The eyes were lost in the infinite sapphire vistas. "How lovely it all is," said Tyltyl, who could not get over his astonishment. "Goodness me, how lovely! Where are we?" "We are in the kingdom of the future," said Light, "in the midst of the children who are not yet born. As the diamond allows us to see clearly in this region which is hidden from men, we shall perhaps find the blue bird here. Look! Look at the children running up." From every side came bands of little children dressed from head to foot in blue. They had beautiful dark or golden hair and they were all exquisitely pretty. They shouted gleefully, "Live children! Come and look at the little live children." "Why do they call us the little live children?" asked Tyltyl, of Light. "It is because they themselves are not alive yet. They are awaiting the hour of their birth, for it is from here that all the children come who are born upon our earth. When the fathers and mothers want children, the great doors which you see over there, at the back, are opened, and the little ones go down." "What a lot there are! What a lot there are!" cried Tyltyl. "There are many more," said Light. "No one could count them. But go a little further, you will see other things." Tyltyl did as he was told and elbowed his way through, but it was difficult for him to move, because a crowd of blue children pressed all around them. At last, by mounting on a step, our little friend was able to look over the throng of inquisitive heads and see what was happening in every part of the hall. It was most extraordinary. Tyltyl had never dreamed of anything like it. He danced with joy, and Mytyl, who was hanging on to him and standing on tiptoe so that she might see too, clapped her little hands and gave loud cries of wonder. All around were millions of children in blue, some playing, others walking about, others talking or thinking. Many were asleep, many also were at work, and their instruments, their tools, the machines which they were building, the plants, the flowers and the fruits which they were growing or gathering were of the same bright and heavenly blue as the general appearance of the palace. Among the children moved tall persons also dressed in blue. They were very beautiful and looked just like angels. They came up to Light and smiled and gently pushed aside the blue children, who went back quietly to what they were doing, though still watching our friends with astonished eyes. One of them, however, remained standing close to Tyltyl. He was quite small. From under his long sky-blue silk dress peeped two little pink and dimpled bare feet. His eyes stared in curiosity at the little live boy, and he went up to him as though in spite of himself. "May I talk to him?" asked Tyltyl, who felt half glad and half frightened. "Certainly," said Light. "You must make friends. I will leave you alone, you will be more at ease by yourselves." So saying, she went away and left the two children face to face, shyly smiling. Suddenly, they began to talk. "How do you do?" said Tyltyl, putting out his hand to the child. But the child did not understand what that meant and stood without moving. "What's that?" continued Tyltyl, touching the child's blue dress. The child, who was absorbed in what he was looking at, did not answer, but gravely touched Tyltyl's hat with his finger. "And that?" he lisped. That's my hat," said Tyltyl. "Have you no hat?" "No, what is it for?" asked the child. "It's to say how do you do with," Tyltyl answered. "And then for when it's cold." "What does that mean, when it's cold?" asked the child. "When you shiver like this, brrr. Brrr," said Tyltyl. "And when you go like this with your arms," vigorously beating his arms across his chest. "Is it cold on earth?" asked the child. "Yes, sometimes, in winter, when there is no fire." "Why is there no fire?" "Because it's expensive, and it costs money to buy wood." The child looked at Tyltyl again as though he did not understand a word that Tyltyl was saying, and Tyltyl in his turn looked amazed. "It's quite clear that he knows nothing of the most everyday things," thought our hero, while the child stared with no small respect at the little live boy who knew everything. Then he asked Tyltyl what money was. "Why, it's what you pay with," said Tyltyl, scorning to give any further explanation. "Oh," said the child, seriously. Of course, he did not understand. How could he know, a little boy like that, who lived in a paradise where his least wishes were granted before he had learned to put them into words? "How old are you?" asked Tyltyl, continuing the conversation. "I am going to be born soon," said the child. "I shall be born in 12 years. Is it nice to be born?" "Oh, yes," cried Tyltyl, without thinking. "It's great fun." But he was very much at a loss when the little boy asked him how he managed. His pride did not allow him to be ignorant of anything in another child's presence, and it was quite droll to see him with his hands in his breeches pockets, his legs wide apart, his face upturned and his whole attitude that of a man who is in no hurry to reply. At last, he answered, with a shrug of the shoulders. Upon my word, I can't remember. It's so long ago. They say it's lovely, the earth and the live people," remarked the child. "Yes, it's not bad," said Tiltle. "There are birds and cakes and toys. Some have them all, but those who have none can look at the others." This reflection shows us the whole character of our little friend. He was proud and inclined to be rather high and mighty, but he was never envious, and his generous nature made up to him for his poverty by allowing him to enjoy the good fortune of others. Other blue children opened great big books. The two children talked a good deal more, but it would take too long to tell you all they said, because what they said was sometimes only interesting to themselves. After a while, Light, who was watching them from a distance, hurried up to them a little anxiously. Tiltle was crying. Big tears came rolling down his cheeks and falling on his smart coat. She understood that he was talking of his grandmother and that he could not keep back his tears at the thought of the love which he had lost. He was turning away his head, to hide his feelings, but the inquisitive child kept asking him questions. "Do the grannies die? What does that mean, dying?" "They go away one evening and do not come back." "Has yours gone?" "Yes," said Tiltle. "She was very kind to me." And, at these words, the poor little fellow began to cry again. The blue child had never seen anyone cry. He lived in a world where grief did not exist. His surprise was great, and he exclaimed, "What's the matter with your eyes? Are they making pearls?" To him those tears were wonderful things. "No, it's not pearls," said Tiltle, sheepishly. "What is it then?" But our poor friend would not admit what he looked upon as a weakness. He rubbed his eyes awkwardly and put everything down to the dazzling blue of the palace. The puzzled child insisted. "What's that falling down?" "Nothing, it's a little water," said Tiltle, impatiently, hoping to cut short the explanation. But that was out of the question. The child was very obstinate, touched Tiltle's cheeks with his finger and asked, in a tone of curiosity, "Does it come from the eyes?" "Yes, sometimes, when one cries." "What does that mean, crying?" asked the child. "I have not been crying," said Tiltle proudly. "It's the fault of that blue. But, if I had cried, it would be the same thing." "Do you often cry on earth?" "Not little boys, but little girls do." "Don't you cry here?" "No, I don't know how." "Well, you will learn." At that moment, a great breath of wind made him turn his head, and he saw, at a few steps away from him, a large piece of machinery which he had not noticed at first, as he was taken up with his interest in the little child. It was a grand and magnificent thing, but I cannot tell you its name, because the inventions of the kingdom of the future will not be christened by man until they reach the earth. I can only say that Tiltle, when he looked at it, thought that the enormous azure wings that whizzed so swiftly before his eyes were like the windmills in his part of the world, and that, if he ever found the blue bird, its wings would certainly be no more delicate, dainty or dazzling. Full of admiration, he asked his new acquaintance what they were. "Those?" said the child. "That's for the invention which I shall make on earth." And, seeing Tiltle stare with wide open eyes, he added, "When I am on earth, I shall have to invent the thing that gives happiness. Would you like to see it? It is over there, between those two columns." Tiltle turned round to look, but all the children at once rushed at him, shouting, "No, no, come and see mine. No, mine is much finer. Mine is a wonderful invention. Mine is made of sugar. His is no good. I'm bringing a light which nobody knows of." And, so saying, the last child lit himself up entirely with a most extraordinary flame. Amid these joyous exclamations, the live children were dragged towards the blue workshops, where each of the little inventors set his machine going. It was a great blue whirl of discs and pulleys and straps and flywheels and driving wheels and cogwheels and all kinds of wheels, which sent every sort of machine skimming over the ground or shooting up to the ceiling. Other blue children unfolded maps and plans, or opened great big books, or uncovered azure statues, or brought enormous flowers and gigantic fruits that seemed made of sapphires and turquoises. Our little friends stood with their mouths wide open and their hands clasped together. They thought themselves in paradise. Myrtle bent over to look at a huge flower and laughed into its cup, which covered up her head like a hood of blue silk. A pretty child, with dark hair and thoughtful eyes, held it by the stalk and said, proudly, "The flowers will all grow like that, when I am on earth." "When will that be?" asked Tiltle. "In 53 years, 4 months and 9 days. Next came 2 blue children bending under the weight of a pole from which was slung a bunch of grapes each larger than a pear. "A bunch of pears," cried Tiltle. "No, they are grapes," said the child. "They will all be like that when I am 30, I have found the way. Tyltal would have loved to taste them, but another child came along almost hidden under a basket which one of the tall persons was helping him to carry. His fair-haired, rosy face smiled through the leaves that hung over the wickerwork. Other blue children unfolded maps and plans or brought enormous flowers. Look, he said. Look at my apples. But those are melons, said Tyltal. No, said the child. They are my apples. They will all be alike when I am alive. I have discovered the process. I should never finish if I were to try and describe to my little readers all the wonderful and incredible things that appeared before our hero's eyes. But, suddenly, a loud burst of laughter rang through the hall. A child had spoken of the king of the 9 planets, and Tyltal, very much puzzled and perplexed, looked on every side. All the faces, bright with laughter, were turned to some spot which Tyltal could not see. Every finger pointed in the same direction, but our friend looked in vain. They had spoken of a king. He was looking for a throne with a tall, dignified personage on it, wielding a golden scepter. Over there, lower down, behind you, said 1,000 little voices together. But where is the king? Tyltal and Meitel repeated, greatly interested. Then, suddenly, a louder and more serious voice sounded above the silvery murmur of the others. Here I am, it said proudly. And, at the same time, Tyltal discovered a chubby baby which he had not yet remarked, for it was the smallest and had kept out of the way till then, sitting at the foot of a column in an attitude of indifference, seemingly wrapped in contemplation. The little king was the only one who had taken no notice of the live children. His beautiful, liquid eyes as blue as the palace, were pursuing endless dreams. His right hand supported his head, which was already heavy with thought, his short tunic showed his dimpled knees, and a golden crown rested on his yellow locks. When he cried, "Here I am," the baby rose from the step on which he was sitting and tried to climb onto it at one stride, but he was still so awkward that he lost his balance and fell upon his nose. He at once picked himself up with so much dignity that nobody dared make fun of him, and, this time, he scrambled up on all fours and then, putting his legs wide apart, stood and eyed Tyltal from top to toe. "You're not very big," said Tyltal, doing his best to keep from laughing. "I shall do great things when I am," retorted the king, in a tone that admitted of no reply. "And what will you do?" asked Tyltal. "I shall found the General Confederation of the Solar Planets," said the king, in a very pompous voice. Our friend was so much impressed that he could not find a word to say, and the king continued. "All the planets will belong to it, except Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune, which are too ridiculously far away." Thereupon, he toddled off the step again and resumed his first attitude, showing that he had said all that he meant to say. Tyltal left him to his meditations. He was eager to know as many more of the children as he could. He was introduced to the discoverer of a new sun, to the inventor of a new joy, to the hero who was to wipe out injustice from the earth, and to the wiseacre who was to conquer death. There were such lots and lots of them that it would take days and days to name them all. Our friend was rather tired and was beginning to feel bored, when his attention was suddenly aroused by hearing a child's voice calling him. "Tyltal! Tyltal! How are you, Tyltal, how are you?" A little blue child came running up from the back of the hall, pushing his way through the crowd. He was fair and slim and bright-eyed and had a great look of Meitel. "How do you know my name?" asked Tyltal. "It's not surprising," said the blue child, "considering that I shall be your brother." This time, the live children were absolutely amazed. What an extraordinary meeting. They must certainly tell Mummy as soon as they got back. How astonished they would be at home. While they were making these reflections, the child went on to explain. "I am coming to you next year, on Palm Sunday," he said. And he put 1,000 questions to his big brother. Was it comfortable at home? Was the food good? Was Daddy very severe? And Mummy? "Oh, Mummy is so kind," said the little ones. And they asked him questions in their turn. What was he going to do on earth? What was he bringing? "I am bringing 3 illnesses," said the little brother. "Scarlatina, whooping cough and measles." "Oh, Thal, is it?" cried Tyltal. He shook his head, with evident disappointment, while the other continued. "After that, I shall leave you. It will hardly be worthwhile coming," said Tyltal, feeling rather vexed. "We can't pick and choose," said the little brother, pettishly. They would perhaps have quarreled, without waiting till they were on earth, if they had not suddenly been parted by a swarm of blue children who were hurrying to meet somebody. At the same time, there was a great noise, as if thousands of invisible doors were being opened at the end of the galleries. "What's the matter?" asked Tyltal. "It's time," said one of the blue children. He's going to open the doors. And the excitement increased on every side. The children left their machines and their labors, those who were asleep woke up, and every eye was eagerly and anxiously turned to the great oval doors at the back, while every mouth repeated the same name. The word, time. Time. Was heard all around, and the great mysterious noise kept on. Tyltle was dying to know what it meant. At last, he caught a little child by the skirt of his dress and asked him. "Let me be," said the child, very uneasily. "I'm in a hurry, it may be my turn today. It is the dawn rising. This is the hour when the children who are to be born today go down to earth. You shall see. Time is drawing the bolts." "Who is Time?" asked Tyltle. "An old man who comes to call those who are going," said another child. "He is not so bad, but he won't listen or hear. Beg as they may, if it's not their turn, he pushes back all those who try to go. Let me be. It may be my turn now." Light now hastened towards our little friends in a great state of alarm. "I was looking for you," she said. "Come quick, it will never do for Time to discover you." As she spoke these words, she threw her gold cloak around the children and dragged them to a corner of the hall, where they could see everything, without being seen. Tyltle was very glad to be so well protected. He now knew that he who was about to appear possessed so great and tremendous a power that no human strength was capable of resisting him. He was at the same time a deity and an ogre. He bestowed life and he devoured it. He sped through the world so fast that you had no time to see him. He ate and ate, without stopping. He took whatever he touched. In Tyltle's family, he had already taken Grandad and Granny, the little brothers, the little sisters and the old blackbird. He did not mind what he took, joys and sorrows, winters and summers, all was fish that came to his net. Knowing this, our friend was astonished to see everybody in the kingdom of the future running so fast to meet him. "I suppose he doesn't eat anything here," he thought. There he was. The great doors turned slowly on their hinges. There was a distant music, it was the sounds of the earth. A red and green light penetrated into the hall, and Time appeared on the threshold. He was a tall and very thin old man, so old that his wrinkled face was all gray, like dust. His white beard came down to his knees. In one hand, he carried an enormous scythe, in the other, an hourglass. Behind him, some way out, on a sea the color of the dawn, was a magnificent gold galley, with white sails. "Are they ready whose hour has struck?" asked Time. At the sound of that voice, solemn and deep as a bronze gong, thousands of bright children's voices, like little silver bells, answered. "Here we are. Here we are. Here we are." And, in a moment, the blue children were crowding round the tall old man, who pushed them all back and, in a gruff voice, said, "One at a time. Once again, there are many more of you than are wanted. You can't deceive me." Brandishing his scythe in one hand and holding out his cloak with the other, he barred the way to the rash children who tried to slip by him. Not one of them escaped the horrid old man's watchful eye. "It's not your turn," he said to one. "You're to be born tomorrow. Nor yours either, you've got 10 years to wait. A 13th shepherd? There are only 12 wanted, there is no need for more. More doctors? There are too many already, they are grumbling about it on earth. And where are the engineers? They want an honest man, only one, as a wonderful being." Thereupon, a poor child, who had hung back, until then, came forward timidly, sucking his thumb. He looked pale and sad and walked with tottering footsteps. He was so wretched that even Time felt a moment's pity. "It's you," he exclaimed. "You seem a very poor specimen." And, in a moment, the blue children were crowding round the tall old man. And, lifting his eyes to the sky, with a look of discouragement, he added, "You won't live long." And the movement went on. Each child, when denied, returned to his employment with a downcast air. When one of them was accepted, the others looked at him with envy. Now and then, something happened, as when the hero who was to fight against injustice refused to go. He clung to his playfellows, who called out to Time. "He doesn't want to, sir." "No, I don't want to go," cried the little fellow, with all his might. "I would rather not be born." "And quite right too," thought Tyltle, who was full of common sense and who knew what things are like on earth. For people always get beatings which they have not deserved, and, when they have done wrong, you may be sure that the punishment will fall on one of their innocent friends. "I wouldn't care to be in his place," said our friend to himself. "I would rather hunt for the blue bird, any day." Meanwhile, the little seeker after justice went away sobbing, frightened out of his life by Mr. Time. The excitement was now at its height. The children ran all over the hall. Those who were going packed up their inventions, those who were staying behind had 1,000 requests to make. Will you write to me? They say one can't. Oh, try, do try. Announce my idea. Goodbye, Jean. Goodbye, Pierre. Have you forgotten anything? Don't lose your ideas. Try to tell us if it's nice. Enough. Enough. Roared Time, in a huge voice, shaking his big keys and his terrible scythe. Enough. The anchors weighed. Then the children climbed into the gold galley, with the beautiful white silk sails. They waved their hands again to the little friends whom they were leaving behind them, but, on seeing the earth in the distance, they cried out, gladly. Earth! Earth! I can see it. How bright it is! How big it is! And, at the same time, as though coming from the abyss, a song rose, a distant song of gladness and expectation. Light, who was listening with a smile, saw the look of astonishment on Toddle's face and bent over him. It is the song of the mothers coming out to meet them, she said. At that moment, Time, who had shut the doors, saw our friends and rushed at them angrily, shaking his scythe at them. Hurry! Said Light. Hurry! Take the blue bird, Toddle, and go in front of me with Mydle. She put into the boy's arms a bird which she held hidden under her cloak and, all radiant, spreading her dazzling veil with her 2 hands, she ran on, protecting her charges from the onslaught of Time. In this way, they passed through several turquoise and sapphire galleries. It was magnificently beautiful, but they were in the kingdom of the future, where Time was the great master, and they must escape from his anger which they had braved. Mydle was terribly frightened and Toddle kept nervously turning round to Light. Don't be afraid, she said. I am the only person whom Time has respected since the world began. Only mind that you take care of the blue bird. He's gorgeous. He is quite blue. This thought enraptured the boy. He felt the precious treasure fluttering in his arms, his hands dared not press the pretty creature's soft, warm wings, and his heart beat against its heart. This time, he held the blue bird. Nothing could touch it, because it was given to him by Light herself. What a triumph when he returned home. He was so bewildered by his happiness that he hardly knew where he was going. His joy rang a victorious peal in his head that made him feel giddy. He was mad with pride, and this, worse luck, made him lose his coolness and his presence of mind. They were just about to cross the threshold of the palace, when a gust of wind swept through the entrance hall, lifting up Light's veil and at last revealing the 2 children to the eyes of Time, who was still pursuing them. With a roar of rage, he darted his scythe at Toddle, who cried out. Light warded off the blow, and the door of the palace closed behind them with a thud. They were saved. But alas, Toddle, taken by surprise, had opened his arms and now, through his tears, saw the bird of the future soaring above their heads, mingling with the azure sky, its dream wings so blue, so light and so transparent that soon the boy could make out nothing more. Chapter 6. In the Temple of Light. Toddle had enjoyed himself thoroughly in the kingdom of the future. He had seen many wonderful things and thousands of little playfellows, and then, without taking the least pains or trouble, had found the blue bird in his arms in the most magical way. He had never pictured anything more beautiful, more blue or brilliant, and he still felt it fluttering against his heart and kept hugging his arms to his breast as though the blue bird were there. Alas, it had vanished like a dream. He was thinking sadly of this latest disappointment as he walked hand in hand with Light. They were back in the temple and were going to the vaults where the animals and things had been shut up. What a sight met their eyes! The wretches had eaten and drunk such a lot that they were lying on the floor quite tipsy. Tylo himself had lost all his dignity. He had rolled under the table and was snoring like a porpoise. His instinct remained, and the sound of the door made him prick up his ears. He opened one eye, but his sight was troubled by all that he had had to drink and he did not know his little master when he saw him. He dragged himself to his feet with a great effort, turned round several times and then dropped on the floor again with a grunt of satisfaction. Bread and the others were as bad, and the only exception was the cat, who was sitting up prettily on a marble and gold bench and seemed in full possession of her senses. She sprang nimbly to the ground and stepped up to Toddle with a smile. I have been longing to see you, she said, for I have been very unhappy among all these vulgar people. They first drank all the wine and then started shouting and singing and dancing, quarreling and fighting and making such a noise that I was very glad when, at last, they fell into a tipsy sleep. The children praised her warmly for her good behavior. As a matter of fact, there was no great merit in this, for she could not stand anything stronger than milk, but we are seldom rewarded when by rights we ought to be and sometimes or when we have not deserved it. After fondly kissing the children, Tylet asked a favor of Light. I have had such a wretched time, she whined. Let me go out for a little while, it will do me good to be alone. The cat at once draped her cloak round her, opened the door and ran and bounded out into the forest. Light gave her consent without suspecting anything, and the cat at once draped her cloak round her, put her hat straight, pulled up her soft gray boots over her knees, opened the door and ran and bounded out into the forest. We shall know, a little later, where treacherous Tylette was going so gaily and what was the horrid plot which she was mysteriously concocting. As on the other days, the children had their dinner with Light in a large room all encrusted with diamonds. The servants bustled around them smiling and brought delicious dishes and cakes. After dinner, our little friends began to yawn. They felt sleepy very early, after all their adventures, and, Light, ever kind and thoughtful, made them live as they were accustomed to on earth. So as not to injure their health by altering their habits, she had set up their little beds in a part of the temple where the darkness would seem like night to them. They went through any number of rooms to reach their bedroom. They had first to pass all the lights known to man and then those which man did not yet know. There were great sumptuous apartments in splendid marble, lit up by rays so white and strong that the children were quite dazzled. "That is the light of the rich," said Light to Tylette. "You see how dangerous it is. People run the risk of going blind when they live too much in its rays, which leave no room for soft and kindly shade." And she hurried them on so that they might rest their eyes in the gentle light of the poor. Here, the children suddenly felt as if they were in their parents' cottage, where everything was so humble and peaceful. The faint light was very pure and clear, but always flickering and ready to go out at the least breath. Next they came to the beautiful light of the poets, which they liked immensely, for it had all the colors of the rainbow, and, when you passed through it, you saw lovely pictures, lovely flowers and lovely toys which you were unable to take hold of. Laughing merrily, the children ran after birds and butterflies, but everything faded away as soon as it was touched. "Well, I never," said Tylette, as he came panting back to Light. "This beats everything. I can't understand it." "You will understand later," she replied, "and, if you understand it properly, you will be among the very few human beings who know the blue bird when they see him." After leaving the region of the poets, our friends reached the light of the learned, which lies on the borders of the known and the unknown lights. "Let's get on," said Tylette. "This is boring." To tell the truth, he was a little bit frightened, for they were in a long row of cold and forbidding arches, which were streaked at every moment by dazzling lightning flashes, and, at each flash, you saw out of the way things that had no name as yet. After these arches, they came to the lights unknown to man, and Tylette, in spite of the sleep that pressed upon his eyelids, could not help admiring the hall with its violet columns and the gallery with its red rays. And the violet of the columns was such a dark violet and the red of the rays such a pale red that it was hardly possible to see either of them. At last, they arrived at the room of smooth, unflecked black light, which men call darkness because their eyes are not yet able to make it out. And here the children fell asleep without delay on two soft beds of clouds. Chapter 7. The Graveyard. When the children were not going on an expedition, they played about in the realms of light, and this was a great treat for them, for the gardens and the country around the temple were as wonderful as the halls and galleries of silver and gold. The leaves of some of the plants were so broad and strong that they were able to lie down on them, and, when a breath of wind stirred the leaves, the children swung as in a hammock. It was always summer there and never a moment was darkened by the night, but the hours were known by their different colors. There were pink, white, blue, lilac, green and yellow hours, and, according to their hues, the flowers, the fruits, the birds, the butterflies and the scents changed, causing Tylette and Meitel a constant surprise. They had all the toys that they could wish for. When they were tired of playing, they stretched themselves out on the backs of the lizards, which were as long and wide as little boats, and quickly raced round the garden paths, over the sand which was as white and as good to eat as sugar. When they were thirsty, water shook her tresses into the cup of the enormous flowers, and the children drank straight out of the lilies, tulips and morning glories. If they were hungry, they picked radiant fruits which revealed the taste of light to them and which had juice that shone like the rays of the sun. There was also, in a clump of bushes, a white marble pond which possessed a magic power. Its clear waters reflected not the faces, but the souls of those who looked into it. "It's a ridiculous invention," said the cat, who steadily refused to go near the pond. You, my dear little readers, who know her thoughts as well as I do, will not be surprised at her refusal. And you will also understand why our faithful Tylette was not afraid to go and quench his thirst there. He need not fear to reveal his thoughts, for he was the only creature whose soul never altered. The dear dog had no feelings but those of love and kindness and devotion. When Tylette bent over the magic mirror, he almost always saw the picture of a splendid blue bird, for the constant wish to find him filled his mind entirely. Then he would run to Light and entreat her. Tell me where he is. You know everything, tell me where to find him. But she replied, in a tone of mystery. I cannot tell you anything. You must find him for yourself. And, kissing him, she added, cheer up, you are getting nearer to him at each trial. Now there came a day on which she said to him, I have received a message from the fairy Barraloon telling me that the blue bird is probably hidden in the graveyard. It appears that one of the dead in the graveyard is keeping him in his tomb. What shall we do? Asked Tottle. It is very simple. At midnight you will turn the diamond and you shall see the dead come out of the ground. At these words, milk, water, bread and sugar began to yell and scream and chatter their teeth. Don't mind them, said Light to Tottle, in a whisper. They are afraid of the dead. I'm not afraid of them, said Fire, frisking about. Time was when I used to burn them, that was much more amusing than nowadays. Oh, I feel I am going to turn, wailed Milk. I'm not afraid, said the dog, trembling in every limb, but if you run away, I shall run away too, and with the greatest pleasure. The cat sat pulling at her whiskers. I know what's what, she said, in her usual mysterious way. Be quiet, said Light. The fairy gave strict orders. You are all to stay with me, at the gate of the graveyard, the children are to go in alone. Tottle felt anything but pleased. He asked, Aren't you coming with us? No, said Light. The time for that has not arrived. Light cannot yet enter among the dead. Besides, there is nothing to fear. I shall not be far away, and those who love me and whom I love always find me again. She had not finished speaking, when everything around the children changed. The wonderful temple, the dazzling flowers, the splendid gardens vanished to make way for a poor little country cemetery, which lay in the soft moonlight. Near the children were a number of graves, grassy mounds, wooden crosses and tombstones. Tottle and Mydle were seized with terror and hugged each other. I am frightened, said Mydle. I am never frightened, stammered Tottle, who was shaking with fear, but did not like to say so. I say, asked Mydle, are the dead wicked? Why, no, said Tottle, they're not alive. Have you ever seen one? Yes, once, long ago, when I was very young. What was it like? Quite white, very still and very cold, and it didn't talk. Are we going to see them? Tottle shuddered at this question and made an unsuccessful effort to steady his voice as he answered. Why, of course, Light said so. Where are the dead? Asked Mydle. Tottle cast a frightened look around him, for the children had not dared to stir since they were alone. The dead are here, he said, under the grass or under those big stones. Are those the doors of their houses? Asked Mydle, pointing to the tombstones. Yes. Do they go out when it's fine? They can only go out at night. Why? Because they are in their nightshirts. Do they go out also when it rains? When it rains, they stay at home. Is it nice in their homes? They say it's very cramped. Have they any little children? Why, yes, they have all those who die. And what do they live on? Tottle stopped to think, before answering. As Mydle's big brother, he felt it his duty to know everything, but her questions often puzzled him. Then he reflected that, as the dead live underground, they can hardly eat anything that is above it, and so he answered very positively. They eat roots. Mydle was quite satisfied and returned to the great question that was occupying her little mind. Shall we see them? She asked. Of course, said Tottle, we see everything when I turn the diamond. And what will they say? Tottle began to grow impatient. They will say nothing, as they don't talk. Why don't they talk? Asked Mydle. Because they have nothing to say, said Tottle, more cross and perplexed than ever. Why have they nothing to say? This time, the little big brother lost all patience. He shrugged his shoulders, gave Mydle a push and shouted angrily. You're a nuisance. Mydle was greatly upset and confused. She sucked her thumb and resolved to hold her tongue forever after, as she had been so badly treated. But a breath of wind made the leaves of the trees whisper and suddenly recalled the children to their fears and their sense of loneliness. They hugged each other tight and began to talk again, so as not to hear the horrible silence. When will you turn the diamond? Asked Mydle. You heard Light say that I was to wait until midnight, because that disturbs them less. It is when they come out to take the air. Isn't it midnight yet? Tottle turned round, saw the church clock and hardly had the strength to answer, for the hands were just upon the hour. Listen, he stammered, listen. It is just going to strike. There. Do you hear? And the clock struck 12. Then Mydle, frightened out of her life, began to stamp her feet and utter piercing screams. I want to go away. I want to go away. Tyltle, though stiff with fright, was able to say, Not now. I am going to turn the diamond. No, 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 cried Mydle. I am so frightened, little brother. Don't do it. I want to go away. Tyltle vainly tried to lift his hand. He could not reach the diamond with Mydle clinging to him, hanging with all her weight on her brother's arm and screaming at the top of her voice. I don't want to see the dead. They will be awful. I can't possibly. I am much too frightened. Poor Tyltle was quite as much terrified as Mydle, but at each trial, his will and courage were becoming greater. He was learning to master himself, and nothing could induce him to fail in his mission. The 11th stroke rang out. The hour is passing, he exclaimed. It is time. And releasing himself resolutely from Mydle's arms, he turned the diamond. A moment of terrible silence followed for the poor little children. Then they saw the crosses totter, the mounds open, the slabs rise up. Mydle hid her face against Tyltle's chest. They're coming out, she cried. They're there. They're there. The agony was more than the plucky little fellow could endure. He shut his eyes and only kept himself from fainting by leaning against a tree beside him. He remained like that for a minute that seemed to him like a century, not daring to move, not daring to breathe. Then he heard birds singing, a warm and scented breeze fanned his face, and, on his hands, on his neck, he felt the soft heat of the balmy summer sun. Now quite reassured, but unable to believe in so great a miracle, he opened his eyes and at once began to shout with happiness and admiration. From all the open tombs came thousands of splendid flowers. They spread everywhere, on the paths, on the trees, on the grass, and they went up and up until it seemed that they would touch the sky. They were great full-blown roses, showing their hearts, wonderful golden hearts from which came the hot, bright rays which had wrapped Tyltle in that summer warmth. Round the roses, birds sang and bees buzzed gaily. I can't believe it. It's not possible, said Tyltle. What has become of the tombs and the stone crosses? Dazzled and bewildered, the two children walked hand in hand through the graveyard, of which not a trace remained, for there was nothing but a wonderful garden on every side. They were as glad and happy as could be, after their terrible fright. They had thought that ugly skeletons would rise from the earth and run after them, pulling horrid faces. They had imagined all sorts of awful things. And now, in the presence of the truth, they saw that all that they had been told was a great big story and that death does not exist. They saw that there are no dead and that life goes on always, always, but under fresh forms. The fading rose sheds its pollen, which gives birth to other roses, and its scattered petals scent the air. The fruits come when the blossoms fall from the trees, and the dingy, hairy caterpillar turns into a brilliant butterfly. Nothing perishes, there are only changes. Beautiful birds circled all round Tyltle and Mydle. There were no blue ones among them, but the two children were so glad of their discovery that they asked for nothing more. Astonished and delighted, they kept on repeating. There are no dead. There are no dead. Chapter 8. The Forest. As soon as Tyltle and Mydle were in bed, light kissed them and faded away at once, so as not to disturb their sleep with the rays that always streamed from her beautiful self. It must have been about midnight, when Tyltle, who was dreaming of the little blue children, felt a soft velvet paw pass to and fro over his face. He was surprised and sat up in bed in a bit of a fright, but he was soon reassured when he saw his friend Tylette's glowing eyes glittering in the dark. Hush! Said the cat in his ear. Hush! Don't wake anybody. If we can arrange to slip out without being seen, we shall catch the blue bird tonight. I have risked my life, oh my dearest master, in preparing a plan which will certainly lead us to victory. But, said the boy kissing Tylette, Light would be so glad to help us, and besides I should be ashamed to disobey her. If you tell her, said the cat, sharply, all is lost, believe me. Do as I say, and the day is ours. As she spoke these words, she hastened to dress him and also Mydle, who had heard a noise and was asking to go with them. You don't understand, groaned Tyltle. You are too small, you don't know what a wicked thing we are doing. But the treacherous cat answered all his arguments, saying that the reason why he had not found the blue bird so far was just the fault of Light, who always brought brightness with her. Let the children only go hunting by themselves, in the dark, and they would soon find all the blue birds that make man's happiness. The traitress displayed such cleverness that, before long, Tyltle's disobedience became a very fine thing in his own eyes. Each of Tylette's words provided a good excuse for his action or adorned it with a generous thought. He was too weak to set his will against trickery, allowed himself to be persuaded and walked out of the temple with a firm and cheerful step. Poor little fellow, if he could only have foreseen the terrible trap that awaited him. Our three companions set out across the fields in the white light of the moon. The cat seemed greatly excited, did nothing but talk and went so fast that the children were hardly able to keep up with her. This time, she declared, we shall have the blue bird, I am sure of it. I asked all the trees in the very oldest forest, they know him, because he hides among them. Then, in order to have everybody there, I sent the rabbit to beat the assembly and call the principal animals in the country. They reached the edge of the dark forest in an hour's time. Then, at a turn in the road, they saw, in the distance, someone who seemed to be hurrying towards them. Tylette arched her back, she felt that it was her old-time enemy. She quivered with rage, was he once more going to thwart her plans? Had he guessed her secret? Was he coming, at the last moment, to save the children's lives? She leaned over to Tylette and whispered to him, in her most honeyed voice. I am sorry to say it is our worthy friend the dog. It is 1,000 pities, because his presence will make us fail in our object. He is on the worst of terms with everybody, even the trees. Do tell him to go back. Go away, you ugly thing, said Tylette, shaking his fist at the dog. Dear old faithful Tylette, who had come because he suspected the cat's plans, was much hurt by these hard words. He was ready to cry, was still out of breath from running and could think of nothing to say. Go away, I tell you, said Tylette again. We don't want you here and there's an end of it. You're a nuisance, there. The dog was an obedient animal and, at any other time, he would have gone, but his affection told him what a serious business it was and he stood stock still. Do you allow this disobedience? Said the cat to Tylette, in a whisper. Hit him with your stick. Tylette beat the dog, as the cat suggested. There, that will teach you to be more obedient, he said. The poor dog howled at receiving the blows, but there was no limit to his self-sacrifice. He went up to his young master pluckily and, taking him in his arms, cried. I must kiss you now you've beaten me. Tylette, who was a good-hearted little fellow, did not know what to do, and the cat swore between her teeth like a wild beast. Fortunately, dear little Myrtle interfered on our friend's behalf. No, I want him to stay, she pleaded. I'm frightened when Tylette's not with us. Time was short and they had to come to a decision. I'll find some other way to get rid of the idiot, thought the cat. And, turning to the dog, she said, in her most gracious manner, we shall be so pleased if you will join us. As they entered the great forest, the children stuck close together, with the cat and the dog on either side of them. They were awed by the silence and the darkness and they felt much relieved when the cat exclaimed. Here we are. Turn the diamond. Then the light spread around them and showed them a wonderful sight. They were standing in the middle of a large round space in the heart of the forest, where all the old trees seemed to reach up to the sky. Wide avenues formed a white star amidst the dark green of the wood. Everything was peaceful and still, but suddenly a strange shiver ran through the foliage, the branches moved and stretched like human arms, the roots raised the earth that covered them, came together, took the shapes of legs and feet and stood on the ground. A tremendous crash rang through the air, the trunks of the trees burst open and each of them let out its soul, which made its appearance like a funny human figure. Some stepped slowly from their trunks, others came out with a jump, and all of them gathered inquisitively round our friends. The talkative poplar began to chatter like a magpie. Little men. We shall be able to talk to them. We have done with silence. Where do they come from? Who are they? And so he rattled on. The lime tree, who was a jolly, fat fellow, came up calmly, smoking his pipe. The conceited and dandified chestnut tree screwed his glass into his eye to stare at the children. He wore a coat of green silk embroidered with pink and white flowers. He thought the little ones too poor looking and turned away in derision. He thinks he's everybody, since he has taken to living in town. He despises us, sneered the poplar, who was jealous of him. Oh dear. What the willow, a wretched little stunted fellow, who came clattering along in a pair of wooden shoes too big for him. They have come to cut off my head and arms for firewood. Tylette could not believe his eyes. He never stopped asking the cat questions. Who's this? Who's that? And Tylette introduced the soul of each tree to him. There was the elm, who was a sort of short-winded, paunchy, crabby gnome, the beech, an elegant, sprightly person, the birch, who looked like the ghosts in the palace of night, with his white flowing garments and his restless gestures. The tallest figure was the fir tree. Tylette found it very difficult to see his face perched right at the top of his long, thin body, but he looked gentle and sad, whereas the cypress, who stood near him, dressed all in black, frightened Tylette terribly. However, so far nothing very dreadful had happened. The trees, delighted at being able to talk, were all chattering together, and our young friend was simply going to ask them where the blue bird was hidden, when, all of a sudden, silence reigned. The trees bowed respectfully and stood aside to make way for an immensely old tree, dressed in a long gown embroidered with moss and lichen. He leaned with one hand on a stick and with the other on a young oak sapling who acted as his guide, for the old oak was blind. His long white beard streamed in the wind. "It's the king," said Tidal to himself, when he saw his mistletoe crown. "I will ask him the secret of the forest." And he was just going up to him, when he stopped, seized with surprise and joy. There sat the blue bird before him, perched on the old oak's shoulder. "He has the blue bird," cried the boy gleefully. "Quick! Quick! Give him to me." "Silence! Hold your tongue," said the greatly shocked trees. "Take off your hat, Tidal," said the cat. "It's the oak." The poor child at once obeyed with a smile. He did not understand the danger that threatened him, and he did not hesitate to answer, "Yes, sir," when the oak asked him if he was still the woodcutter's son. Then the oak, trembling with rage, began to lay a terrible charge against Daddydle. "In my family alone," he said, "your father has put to death 600 of my sons, 475 uncles and aunts, 1,200 cousins of both sexes, 380 daughters-in-law and 12,000 great-grandsons." No doubt his anger made him exaggerate a little, but Tidal listened without protest and said, very politely, "I beg your pardon, sir, for disturbing you. The cat said that you would tell us where the bluebird is." The oak was too old not to know all there was to know about men and animals. He smiled in his beard when he guessed the trap laid by the cat, and he felt very glad at it, for he had long wished to revenge the whole forest for the slavery to which man had subjected it. "It's for the fairy Barrowloom's little girl, who is very ill," the boy continued. "Enough," said the oak, silencing him. "I do not hear the animals. Where are they? All this concerns them as much as us. We, the trees, must not assume the responsibility alone for the grave measures that have become necessary." "Here they come," said the fir tree, looking over the top of the other trees. "They are following the rabbit. I can see the souls of the horse, the bull, the ox, the cow, the wolf, the sheep, the pig, the goat, and the bear." All the animals now arrived. They walked on their hind legs and were dressed like human beings. They solemnly took up their positions in a circle among the trees, all except the frivolous goat, who began to skip down the avenues, and the pig, who hoped to find some glorious truffles among the roots that had newly left the ground. "Are all here present?" asked the oak. "The hen could not leave her eggs," said the rabbit. "The hare was out for a run, the stag has pains in his horns and his corns, the fox is ill, here is the doctor's certificate, the goose did not understand, and the turkey flew into a passion." "Look," whispered Tidal to Midle. "Aren't they funny? They are just like the rich children's fine toys in the windows at Christmas time." The rabbit especially made them laugh, with his cocked hat over his big ears, his blue, embroidered coat and his drum slung in front of him. Meanwhile, the oak was explaining the situation to his brothers the trees and to the animals. Treacherous Tylette had been quite right in reckoning on their hatred. "The child you see before you," said the oak, "thanks to a talisman stolen from the powers of earth, is able to take possession of our bluebird and thus to snatch from us the secret which we have kept since the origin of life. Now we know enough of man to entertain no doubt as to the fate which he reserves for us, once he is in possession of this secret. Any hesitation would be both foolish and criminal. It is a serious moment, the child must be done away with before it is too late." "What is he saying?" asked Tidal, who could not make out what the old tree was driving at. The dog was prowling round the oak and now showed his fangs. "Do you see my teeth, you old cripple?" he growled. "He is insulting the oak," said the beech indignantly. "Drive him out," shouted the oak, angrily. "He's a traitor." "What did I tell you?" whispered the cat to Tidal. "I will arrange things. But send him away." "Will you be off?" said Tidal to the dog. "Do let me worry the gouty old beggar's moss slippers," begged Tylo. Tidal tried in vain to prevent him. The rage of Tylo, who understood the danger, knew no bounds, and he would have succeeded in saving his master, if the cat had not thought of calling in the ivy, who till then had kept his distance. The dog pranced about like a madman, abusing everybody. He railed at the ivy. "Come on, if you dare, you old ball of twine, you." The onlookers growled. The oak was pale with fury at seeing his authority denied, the trees and the animals were indignant, but, as they were cowards, not one of them dared protest, and the dog would have settled all of them, if he had gone on with his rebellion. But Tidal threatened him harshly, and, suddenly yielding to his docile instincts, Tylo lay down at his master's feet. Thus it is that our finest virtues are treated as faults, when we exercise them without discrimination. From that moment, the children were lost. The ivy gagged and bound the poor dog, who was then taken behind the chestnut tree and tied to his biggest root. Now, cried the oak, in a voice of thunder, we can take counsel quietly. This is the first time that it is given us to judge man. I do not think that, after the monstrous injustice which we have suffered, there can remain the least doubt as to the sentence that awaits him. One cry rang from every throat. Death! 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 The poor children did not at first understand their doom, for the trees and animals, who were more accustomed to talking their own special language, did not speak very distinctly, and, besides, the innocent children could never imagine such cruelty. What is the matter with them? Asked the boy. Are they displeased? Don't be alarmed, said the cat. They are a little annoyed because spring is late. And she went on talking into Tyldel's ear, to divert his attention from what was happening. While the trusting lad was listening to her fibs, the others were discussing which form of execution would be the most practical and the least dangerous. The bull suggested a good butt with the horns, the beech offered his highest branch to hang the little children on, and the ivy was already preparing a slipknot. The fir tree was willing to give the 4 planks for the coffin and the cypress the perpetual grant of a tomb. By far the simplest way, whispered the willow, would be to drown them in one of my rivers. And the pig grunted between his teeth. In my opinion, the great thing would be to eat the little girl. She ought to be very tender. Silence! Roared the oak. What we have to decide is which of us shall have the honor of striking the first blow. That honor falls to you, our king, said the fir tree. Alas, I am too old, replied the oak. I am blind and infirm. To you, my evergreen brother, be the glory, in my place, of striking the decisive blow that shall set us free. But the fir tree declined the honor on the pretext that he was all ready to have the pleasure of burying the 2 victims and that he was afraid of rousing jealousy. He suggested the beech, as owning the best club. It is out of the question, said the beech. You know I am worm-eaten. Asked the elm and the cypress. Thereupon the elm began to moan and groan. A mole had twisted his great toe the night before and he could hardly stand upright, and the cypress excused himself and so did the poplar, who declared that he was ill and shivering with fever. Then the oak's indignation flared up. You are afraid of man, he exclaimed. Even those unprotected and unarmed little children inspire you with terror. Well, I shall go forth alone, old and shaky and blind as I am, against the hereditary enemy. Where is he? And groping his way with his stick, he moved towards Tyldel, growling as he went. Our poor little friend had been very much afraid during the last few minutes. The cat had left him suddenly, saying that she wanted to smooth down the excitement, and had not come back. Mydel nestled trembling against him, and he felt very lonely, very unhappy among those dreadful people whose anger he was beginning to notice. When he saw the oak marching on him with a threatening air, he drew his pocket knife and defied him like a man. Is it I he's after, that old one, with his big stick? He cried. But, at the sight of the knife, man's irresistible weapon, all the trees shook with fright and rushed at the oak to hold him back. There was a struggle, and the old king, conquered by the weight of years, threw away his stick. Shame on us! He shouted. Shame on us! Let the animals deliver us. The animals were only waiting for this. All wanted to be revenged together. Fortunately, their very eagerness caused a scrimmage which delayed the murder of the dear little ones. Mydel uttered piercing screams. Don't be afraid, said Tyldel, doing his best to protect her. I have my knife. The little chap means to die game, said the cock. That's the one I shall eat first, said the pig, eyeing Mydel greedily. What have I done to all of you? Asked Tyldel. Nothing at all, my little man, said the sheep. Eaten my little brother, my 2 sisters, my 3 uncles, my aunt, my grandpapa and my grandmama. Wait, when you're down, you shall see that I have teeth also. And so the sheep and the horse, who were the greatest cowards, waited for the little fellow to be knocked down before they dared take their share in the spoil. While they were talking, the wolf and the bear treacherously attacked Tyldel from behind and pushed him over. It was an awful moment. All the animals, seeing him on the ground, tried to get at him. The boy raised himself to one knee and brandished his knife. Mydel uttered yells of distress, and, to crown all, it suddenly became dark. Tyldel called wildly for assistance. Help! Help! Tylo! Tylo! To the rescue! Where is Tylet? Come! Come! The cat's voice was heard in the distance, where she was craftily keeping out of sight. I can't come. She whined. I'm wounded. All this time, plucky little Tyltle was defending himself as best he could, but he was alone against all of them, felt that he was going to be killed and, in a faltering voice, cried once more. Help! Tylo! Tylo! I can't hold out. There are too many of them. The bear. The pig. The wolf. The fir tree. The beech. Tylo! 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 Then the dog came leaping along, dragging his broken bonds and elbowing his way through the trees and animals and flung himself before his master, whom he defended furiously. Here, my little god. Don't be afraid. Have at them. I know how to use my teeth. All the trees and animals raised a loud outcry. Renegade. Idiot. Traitor. Felon. Simpleton. Sneak. Leave him. He's a dead man. Come over to us. The dog fought on. Never. Never. I alone against all of you. Never. Never. True to the gods, to the best, to the greatest. Take care, my little master, here's the bear. Look out for the bull. Tyltle vainly tried to defend himself. I'm done for, Tylo. It was a blow from the elm. My hand's bleeding. And he dropped to the ground. No, I can hold out no longer. They are coming, said the dog. I hear somebody. We are saved. It is Light. Saved. Saved. See, they're afraid, they're retreating. Saved, my little king. And, sure enough, Light was coming towards them, and with her the dawn rose over the forest, which became light as day. What is it? What has happened? She asked, quite alarmed at the sight of the little ones and their dear Tylo covered with wounds and bruises. Why, my poor boy, didn't you know? Turn the diamond quickly. Tyltle hastened to obey, and immediately the souls of all the trees rushed back into their trunks, which closed upon them. The souls of the animals also disappeared, and there was nothing to be seen but a cow and a sheep browsing peacefully in the distance. The forest became harmless once more, and Tyltle looked around him in amazement. No matter, he said, but for the dog, and if I hadn't had my knife. Light thought that he had been punished enough and did not scold him. Besides, she was very much upset by the horrible danger which he had run. Tyltle, Mydle and the dog, glad to meet again safe and sound, exchanged wild kisses. They laughingly counted their wounds, which were not very serious. Tylette was the only one to make a fuss. The dog's broken my paw. She mewed. Tylo felt as if he could have made a mouthful of her. Never mind, he said. It'll keep. Leave her alone, will you, you ugly beast? Said Mydle. Our friends went back to the Temple of Light to rest after their adventure. Tyltle, repenting of his disobedience, dared not even mention the blue bird of which he had caught a glimpse, and Light said to the children, gently, let this teach you, dears, that man is all alone against all in this world. Never forget that. A regular waterfall of tears came gushing from her eyes, flooding all around her. Chapter 9. The Leave-Taking. Weeks and months had passed since the children's departure on their journey, and the hour of separation was at hand. Light had been very sad lately. She had counted the days in sorrow, without a word to the animals and things, who had no idea of the misfortune that threatened them. On the day when we see them for the last time, they were all out in the gardens of the temple. Light stood watching them from a marble terrace, with Tyltle and Mydle sleeping by her side. Much had happened in the past 12 months, but the life of the animals and things, which had no intelligence to guide it, had made no progress, on the contrary. Bread had eaten so much that he was now not able to walk, milk, devoted as ever, dragged him along in a bath chair. Fire's nasty temper had made him quarrel with everybody and he had become very lonely and unhappy in consequence. Water, who had no will of her own, had ended by yielding to Sugar's sweet entreaties. They were now married, and Sugar presented a most piteous sight. The poor fellow was reduced to a shadow of his former self, shrank visibly day by day and was sillier than ever, while Water, in marrying, had lost her principal charm, her simplicity. The cat had remained the liar that she always was, and our dear friend Tylo had never been able to overcome his hatred for her. Poor things! Thought Light, with a sigh. They have not gained much by receiving the benefit of life. They have traveled and seen nothing of all the wonders that surrounded them in my peaceful temple. They were either quarreling with one another or overeating themselves until they fell ill. They were too foolish to enjoy their happiness and they will recognize it for the first time presently, when they are about to lose it. At that moment, a pretty dove, with silver wings, alighted on her knees. It wore an emerald collar round its neck, with a note fastened to the clasp. The dove was the fairy Barraloon's messenger. Light opened the letter and read these few words. Remember that the year is over. Then Light stood up, waved her wand and everything disappeared from sight. A few seconds later, the whole company were gathered together outside a high wall with a small door in it. The first rays of the dawn were gilding the treetops. Tyltyl and Mytyl, whom Light was fondly supporting with her arms, woke up, rubbed their eyes and looked around them in astonishment. "What?" said Light to Tyltyl. "Don't you know that wall and that little door?" The sleepy boy shook his head, he remembered nothing. Then Light assisted his memory. "The wall," she said, "surrounds a house which we left one evening just a year ago today." "Just a year ago? Why, then?" And, clapping his hands with glee, Tyltyl ran to the door. "We must be near Mummy. I want to kiss her at once, at once, at once." But Light stopped him. It was too early, she said, Mummy and Daddy were still asleep and he must not wake them with a start. "Besides," she added, "the door will not open till the hour strikes." "What hour?" asked the boy. "The hour of separation," Light answered, sadly. "What?" said Tyltyl, in great distress. "Are you leaving us?" "I must," said Light. "The year is past. The fairy will come back and ask you for the bluebird." "But I haven't got the bluebird," cried Tyltyl. The one of the land of memory turned quite black, the one of the future flew away, the nights are dead, those in the graveyard were not blue and I could not catch the one in the forest. Will the fairy be angry? What will she say? "Never mind, dear," said Light. "You did your best. And, though you did not find the bluebird, you deserve to do so, for the goodwill, pluck and courage which you showed." Light's face beamed with happiness as she spoke these words, for she knew that to deserve to find the bluebird was very much the same thing as finding it, but she was not allowed to say this, for it was a beautiful mystery, which Tyltyl had to solve for himself. She turned to the animals and things, who stood weeping in a corner, and told them to come and kiss the children. Bread at once put down the cage at Tyltyl's feet and began to make a speech. "In the name of all, I crave permission." "You shan't have mine," cried Fire. "Order," cried Water. "We still have tongues of our own," roared Fire. "Yes, yes," screamed Sugar, who, knowing that his end was at hand, kept kissing Water and melting before the others' eyes. Poor Bread in vain tried to make his voice heard above the din. Light had to interfere and command silence. Then Bread spoke his last words. "I am leaving you," he said, between his sobs. "I am leaving you, my dear children, and you will no longer see me in my living form. Your eyes are about to close to the invisible life of things, but I shall be always there, in the bread pan, on the shelf, on the table, beside the soup, I who am, if I may say so, the most faithful companion, the oldest friend of man." "Well, and what about me?" shouted Fire, angrily. "Silence," said Light. "The hour is passing. Be quick and say goodbye to the children." Fire rushed forward, took hold of the children, one after the other, and kissed them so violently that they screamed with pain. "Oh! Oh! He's burning me! Oh! Oh! He's scorched my nose!" "Let me kiss the place and make it well," said Water, going up to the children gently. This gave Fire his chance. "Take care," he said, "you'll get wet." "I am loving and gentle," said Water. "I am kind to human beings." "What about those you drown?" asked Fire. But Water pretended not to hear. "Love the wells, listen to the brooks," she said. "I shall always be there. When you sit down in the evening, beside the springs, try to understand what they are trying to say." Then she had to break off, for a regular waterfall of tears came gushing from her eyes, flooding all around her. However, she resumed. "Think of me when you see the water bottle. You will find me also in the ewer, the watering can, the cistern and the tap." Then Sugar came up, with a limping walk, for he could hardly stand on his feet. He uttered a few words of sorrow, in an affected voice and then stopped, for tears, he said, were not in harmony with his temperament. "Humbug!" cried Bread. "Sugarplum! Lollipop! Caramel!" yelped Fire. Closely pursued by the dog, who overwhelmed her with bites, blows and kicks. And all began to laugh, except the two children, who were very sad. "Where are Tylette and Tylo gone to?" asked our hero. At that moment, the cat came running up, in a terrible state. Her hair was on end and disheveled, her clothes were torn and she was holding a handkerchief to her cheek, as though she had the toothache. She uttered terrible groans and was closely pursued by the dog, who overwhelmed her with bites, blows and kicks. The others rushed in between them to separate them, but the two enemies continued to insult and glare at each other. The cat accused the dog of pulling her tail and putting tin tacks in her food and beating her. The dog simply growled and denied none of his actions. "You've had some," he kept saying, "you've had some and you're going to have some more." But, suddenly, he stopped and, as he was panting with excitement, it could be seen that his tongue turned quite white. Light had told him to kiss the children for the last time. "For the last time?" stammered poor Tylo. "Are we to part from these poor children?" His grief was such that he was incapable of understanding anything. "Yes," said Light. "The hour which you know of is at hand. We are going to return to silence." Thereupon the dog, suddenly realizing his misfortune, began to utter real howls of despair and fling himself upon the children, whom he loaded with mad and violent caresses. "No. No," he cried. "I refuse. I refuse. I shall always talk. And I shall be very good. You will keep me with you and I shall learn to read and write and play dominoes. And I shall always be very clean. And I shall never steal anything in the kitchen again." He went on his knees before the two children, sobbing and entreating, and, when Tylo, with his eyes full of tears, remained silent, dear Tylo had a last magnificent idea. Running up to the cat, he offered, with smiles that looked like grins, to kiss her. Tylet, who did not possess his spirit of self-sacrifice, leapt back and took refuge by Meitl's side. Then Meitel said, innocently, "You, Tylet, are the only one that hasn't kissed us yet." The cat put on a mincing tone. "Children," said she, "I love you both as much as you deserve." There was a pause. "And now," said Light, "let me, in my turn, give you a last kiss." As she spoke, she spread her veil round them as if she would have wrapped them for the last time in her luminous might. Then she gave them each a long and loving kiss. Tylo and Meitel hung on to her beseechingly. "No, no, no, Light," they cried. "Stay here with us. Daddy won't mind. We will tell Mummy how kind you have been." "Where will you go all alone?" "Not very far, my children," said Light. "Over there to the land of the silence of things." "No, no," said Tylo. "I won't have you go." But Light quieted them with a motherly gesture and said words to them which they never forgot. Long after, when they were a grandfather and grandmother in their turn, Tylo and Meitel still remembered them and used to repeat them to their grandchildren. Here are Light's touching words. "Listen, Tylo. Do not forget, child, that everything that you see in this world has neither beginning nor end. If you keep this thought in your heart and let it grow up with you, you will always, in all circumstances, know what to say, what to do and what to hope for." And, when our two friends began to sob, she added, lovingly, "Do not cry, my dear little ones. I have not a voice like water, I have only my brightness, which man does not understand. But I watch over him to the end of his days. Never forget that I am speaking to you in every spreading moonbeam, in every twinkling star, in every dawn that rises, in every lamp that is lit, in every good and bright thought of your soul." At that moment, the grandfather's clock in the cottage struck 8 o'clock. Light stopped for a moment and then, in a voice that grew suddenly fainter, whispered, "Goodbye. Goodbye. The hour is striking. Goodbye." Her veil faded away, her smile became paler, her eyes closed, her form vanished and, through their tears, the children saw nothing but a thin ray of light dying away at their feet. Then they turned to the others, but these had disappeared. Chapter 10. The Awakening. The grandfather's clock until the woodcutter's cottage had struck 8, and his two little children, Tylo and Meitel, were still asleep in their little beds. Mummiedel stood looking at them, with her arms akimbo and her apron tucked up, laughing and scolding in the same breath. "I can't let them go on sleeping till midday," she said. "Come, get up, you little lazybones." But it was no use shaking them, kissing them or pulling the bedclothes off them. They kept on falling back upon their pillows, with their noses pointing at the ceiling, their mouths wide open, their eyes shut and their cheeks all pink. At last, after receiving a gentle thump in the ribs, Tylo opened one eye and murmured, "What? Light? Where are you? No, no, don't go away." "Light!" cried Mummiedel, laughing. "Why, of course, it's Light. Has been for ever so long. What's the matter with you? You look quite blinded." "Mummy. Mummy," said Tylo, rubbing his eyes. "It's you." "Why, of course, it's I. Why do you stare at me in that way? Is my nose turned upside down, by any chance?" Tylo was quite awake by this time and did not trouble to answer the question. He was beside himself with delight. It was ages and ages since he had seen his mummy, and he never tired of kissing her. Mummydle began to be uneasy. What could the matter be? Had her boy lost his senses? Here he was suddenly talking of a long journey in the company of the fairy, and water and milk and sugar and fire and bread and light. He made believe that he had been away a year. But you haven't left the room, cried Mummydle, who was now nearly beside herself with fright. I put you to bed last night, and here you are this morning. It's Christmas Day, don't you hear the bells in the village? Of course, it's Christmas Day, said Tyltyl, obstinately, seeing that I went away a year ago, on Christmas Eve. You're not angry with me? Did you feel very sad? And what did Daddy say? Come, we're still asleep, said Mummydle, trying to take comfort. You've been dreaming. Get up and put on your breeches and your little jacket. Hello, I've got my shirt on, said Tyltyl. And, leaping up, he knelt down on the bed and began to dress, while his mother kept on looking at him with a scared face. The little boy rattled on. Ask Mummydle, if you don't believe me. Oh, we have had such adventures. We saw Grandad and Granny, yes, in the land of memory, it was on our way. They are dead, but they are quite well, aren't they, Mummydle? And Mummydle, who was now beginning to wake up, joined her brother in describing their visit to the grandparents and the fun which they had had with their little brothers and sisters. This was too much for Mummydle. She ran to the door of the cottage and called with all her might to her husband, who was working on the edge of the forest. Oh dear, she cried. I shall lose them as I lost the others. Do come. Come quick. Daddydle soon entered the cottage. With his axe in his hand, he listened to his wife's lamentations, while the two children told the story of their adventures over again and asked him what he had done during the year. You see, said Mummydle, crying. They have lost their heads, something will happen to them, run and fetch the doctor. But the woodcutter was not the man to put himself out for such a trifle. He kissed the little ones, calmly lit his pipe, and declared that they looked very well and that there was no hurry. At that moment, there came a knock at the door and the neighbor walked in. She was a little old woman leaning on a stick and very much like the fairy Barraloon. The children at once flung their arms around her neck and capered round her, shouting merrily. It's the fairy Barraloon. The neighbor, who was a little hard of hearing, paid no attention to their cries and said to Mummydle, I have come to ask for a bit of fire for my Christmas stew. It's very chilly this morning. Good morning, children. Meanwhile, Tyltyl had become a little thoughtful. No doubt, he was glad to see the old fairy again, but what would she say when she heard that he had not the bluebird? He made up his mind like a man and went up to her boldly. Fairy Barraloon, I could not find the bluebird. What is he saying? Asked the neighbor, quite taken aback. Thereupon Mummydle began to fret again. Come, Tyltyl, don't you know Goody Berlingot? Why, yes, of course, said Tyltyl, looking the neighbor up and down. It's the fairy Barraloon. Very, what? Asked the neighbor. Barraloon, answered Tyltyl, calmly. Berlingot, said the neighbor. You mean Berlingot? Tyltyl was a little put out by her positive way of talking, and he answered. Barraloon or Berlingot, as you please, ma'am, but I know what I'm saying. Daddydle was beginning to have enough of it. We must put a stop to this, he said. I will give them a smack or two. Don't, said the neighbor, it's not worthwhile. It's only a little fit of dreaming, they must have been sleeping in the moonbeams. My little girl, who is very ill, is often like that. Mummydle put aside her own anxiety for a moment and asked after the health of neighbor Berlingot's little girl. She's only so-so, said the neighbor, shaking her head. She can't get up. The doctor says it's her nerves. I know what would cure her, for all that. She was asking me for it only this morning, for her Christmas present. She hesitated a little, looked at Tyltyl with a sigh and added, in a disheartened tone. What can I do? It's a fancy she has. The others looked at one another in silence, they knew what the neighbor's words meant. Her little girl had long been saying that she would get well if Tyltyl would only give her his dove, but he was so fond of it that he refused to part with it. Well, said Mummydle to her son, won't you give your bird to that poor little thing? She has been dying to have it for ever so long. My bird! Cried Tyltyl, slapping his forehead as though they had spoken of something quite out of the way. My bird! He repeated. That's true, I was forgetting about him. And the cage? Mummydle, do you see the cage? It's the one which Bread carried. Yes, it's the same one, there it is. It's the blue bird we were looking for. We have been miles and miles and miles. And he was here all the time. Tildle would not believe his eyes. He took a chair, put it under the cage and climbed onto it gaily, saying, "Of course, I'll give him to her, of course, I will." Then he stopped, in amazement. "Why, he's blue," he said. "It's my dove, just the same, but he has turned blue while I was away." And our hero jumped down from the chair and began to skip for joy, crying, "It's the blue bird we were looking for. We have been miles and miles and miles, and he was here all the time. He was here, at home. Oh, but how wonderful! Mydle, do you see the bird? What would Light say? There, Madame Berlingot, take him quickly to your little girl." While he was talking, Mummitle threw herself into her husband's arms and moaned. You see? You see? He's taken bad again. He's wandering." Meantime, neighbor Berlingot beamed all over her face, clasped her hands together and mumbled her thanks. When Tildle gave her the bird, she could hardly believe her eyes. She hugged the boy in her arms and wept with joy and gratitude. "Do you give it me?" she kept saying. "Do you give it me like that, straight away and for nothing? Goodness, how happy she will be. I fly, I fly. I will come back to tell you what she says." "Yes, yes, go quickly," said Tildle, for some of them changed their color. Neighbor Berlingot ran out and Tildle shut the door after her. Then he turned round on the threshold, looked at the walls of the cottage, looked all around him and seemed wonderstruck. "Daddy, Mummy, what have you done to the house?" he asked. "It's just as it was, but it's much prettier." His parents looked at each other in bewilderment, and the little boy went on. "Why, yes, everything has been painted and made to look like new, everything is clean and polished. And look at the forest outside the window. How big and fine it is. One would think it was quite new. How happy I feel here, oh, how happy I feel." The worthy woodcutter and his wife could not make out what was coming over their son, but you, my dear little readers, who have followed Tildle and Mydle through their beautiful dream, will have guessed what it was that altered everything in our young hero's view. It was not for nothing that the fairy, in his dream, had given him a talisman to open his eyes. He had learned to see the beauty of things around him, he had passed through trials that had developed his courage, while pursuing the blue bird, the bird of happiness that was to bring happiness to the fairy's little girl. He had become open-handed and so good-natured that the mere thought of giving pleasure to others filled his heart with joy. And, while traveling through endless, wonderful, imaginary regions, his mind had opened out to life. The boy was right, when he thought everything more beautiful, for, to his richer and purer understanding, everything must needs seem infinitely fairer than before. Meanwhile, Tildle continued his joyful inspection of the cottage. He leaned over the bread pan to speak a kind word to the loaves, he rushed at Tylo, who was sleeping in his basket, and congratulated him on the good fight which he had made in the forest. Mydle stooped down to stroke Tylet, who was snoozing by the stove, and said, "Well, Tylet? You know me, I see, but you have stopped talking." Then Tildle put his hand up to his forehead. "Hello," he cried. "The diamond's gone. Who's taken my little green hat? Never mind, I don't want it any more. Ah, there's fire. Good morning, sir. He'll be crackling to make water angry." He ran to the tap, turned it on and bent down over the water. "Good morning, water, good morning. What did she say? She still talks, but I don't understand her as well as I did. Oh, how happy I am, how happy I am." So am I, cried Mydle. And our two young friends took each other's hands and began to scamper round the kitchen. Mummitle felt a little relieved at seeing them so full of life and spirits. Besides, Daddytle was so calm and placid. He sat eating his porridge and laughing. "You see, they are playing at being happy," he said. Of course, the poor dear man did not know that a wonderful dream had taught his little children not to play at being happy, but to be happy, which is the greatest and most difficult of lessons. "I like Light best of all," said Tildle to Mydle, standing on tiptoe by the window. "You can see her over there, through the trees of the forest. Tonight, she will be in the lamp. Dear, oh, dear, how lovely it all is and how glad I feel, how glad I—" He stopped and listened. Everybody lent an ear. They heard laughter and merry voices, and the sounds came nearer. "It's her voice!" cried Tildle. "Let me open the door." As a matter of fact, it was the little girl with her mother, neighbor Berlingot. "Look at her," said Goody Berlingot, quite overcome with joy. "She can run, she can dance, she can fly. It's a miracle. When she saw the bird, she jumped, just like that." And Goody Berlingot hopped from one leg to the other at the risk of falling and breaking her long, hooked nose. The children clapped their hands and everybody laughed. The little girl was there, in her long white nightdress, standing in the middle of the kitchen, a little surprised to find herself on her feet after so many months' illness. She smiled and pressed Toddle's dove to her heart. Toddle looked first at the child and then at Mydle. "Don't you think she's very like Light?" he asked. "She is much smaller," said Mydle. "Yes, indeed," said Toddle. "But she will grow." And the three children tried to put a little food down the bird's beak, while the parents began to feel easier in their minds and looked at them and smiled. Toddle was radiant. "I will not conceal from you, my dear little readers, that the dove had hardly changed color at all, and that it was joy and happiness that decked him with the magnificent bright blue plumage in our hero's eyes. No matter." Toddle, without knowing it, had discovered Light's great secret, which is that we draw nearer to happiness by trying to give it to others. But now something happened. Everybody became excited, the children screamed, the parents threw up their arms and rushed to the open door. The bird had suddenly escaped. He was flying away as fast as he could. "My bird! My bird!" sobbed the little girl. But Toddle was the first to run to the staircase, and he returned in triumph. "It's all right," he said. "Don't cry. He is still in the house and we shall find him again." And he gave a kiss to the little girl, who was already smiling through her tears. "You'll be sure to catch him again, won't you?" she asked. "Trust me," replied our friend, confidentially. "I now know where he is. You also, my dear little readers, now know where the blue bird is." Dear Light revealed nothing to the woodcutter's children, but she showed them the road to happiness by teaching them to be good and kind and generous. Suppose that, at the beginning of this story, she had said to them, "Go straight back home. The blue bird is there, in the humble cottage, in the wicker cage, with your dear father and mother who love you." The children would never have believed her. "What?" Toddle would have answered. "The blue bird, my dove? Nonsense, my dove is gray. Happiness, in the cottage. With Daddy and Mummy? Oh, I say. There are no toys at home and it's awfully boring there. We want to go ever so far and meet with tremendous adventures and have all sorts of fun." That is what he would have said, and he and Mydle would have set out in spite of everything, without listening to Light's advice, for the most certain truths are good for nothing if we do not put them to the test ourselves. It only takes a moment to tell a child all the wisdom in the world, but our whole lives are not long enough to help us understand it, because our own experience is our only light. Each of us must seek out happiness for himself, and he has to take endless pains and undergo many a cruel disappointment before he learns to become happy by appreciating the simple and perfect pleasures that are always within easy reach of his mind and heart. The end.
英語聞き流しリスニング、英語テキストと MP3 音声ダウンロードはホームページからご利用いただけます。88thpp.com、88thpp.com